I stood in my kitchen, and beneath the spatula I held, the golden lemon glaze swirled like a storm was closing in on it, sweet, sour, and violent, like a mirror of my heartbeat. The scent of sugar and citrus lingered in the air, as if clinging to memories I didn't want to, but couldn't erase. It had been Jimena's favorite since she was a little girl, running around the backyard barefoot, with pigtails and scratched knees. I called it sunshine cake. I made it every year for illnesses, holidays, even the year German died, but this time felt different. I spent the morning humming, setting the table with her favorite margarita, cleaning the silverware twice, even ironing the napkins. A part of me, the naive part, believed that today I might soften something in her. At noon, the front door creaked open. Jimena came in first, her coat hanging over her arm, followed by her husband Ismael and their 2 children. They barely looked at me as they came in. Surprisingly, I said, a light but mysterious smile on my lips. Today, I did something that will change everything. Jimena stopped at the door, her face unreadable. She looked around the room as if she didn't recognize me. Or maybe it didn't matter. "What's all this?" she asked. I pointed to the lemon cake, your favorite. I thought we could have lunch like before. She crossed her arms. "Mom, don't you understand? I don't need cake or lunch. The best gift you could give me is to disappear from my life." I said nothing. I couldn't speak. The words pierced my heart, sharp and sudden. "I'm tired of you all messing around." Ishmael looked at the floor. The kids walked into the living room without saying anything. They left before I could respond. The door slammed shut behind them. I sat down at the table I had carefully set and stared at the untouched cake. The scent of lemon was still there, but it didn't feel like sunshine anymore. I smelled something I had to forget. I wrapped the cake in foil and put it in the fridge. Then I turned off the lights one by one until only the hall lamp remained, and in that silence, I was left with words I couldn't bring back. That night, I sat alone at the dining room table, the lemon cake still on. It was in the fridge, wrapped in its untouched and unnecessary foil. There was a silence in the room that wasn't peace, just absence. The centerpiece of the daisy was beginning to wilt. As I glanced at Jimena's chair, a petal fell off. Her words echoed in my mind over and over, as if repeating them would make them more meaningful. "Disappear from my life. How do you raise someone with your own hands? You hold their hand through every illness and every sadness, and then you are told you are no longer needed. No warning, no preparation, just a cold, final denial." I looked around the house, but I saw nothing of mine. The curtains were no longer mine. The living room had been repainted a light gray, which Jimena insisted was more modern. My favorite reading chair was in the garage, removed to make room for her sectional sofa. As for my bedroom, my refuge, it was no longer mine. Now I slept in the guest room, a place that was never meant to be lived in. Everything happened gradually. First the requests, then the guesses. Just until we saved enough. It's temporary. But the temporary turned into years, and I involuntarily grew smaller, inch by inch, decision by decision. I believed that love was sacrifice, and that living together was the language of affection. But sitting at that table, where the only sound was the soft hum of the fridge, I wondered if I had just taught them how easy it is to make me disappear. I got up and walked with heavy steps to the guest room, but something was stirring inside me, for the first time in a long time. I didn't cry that night. At least, not out loud. I sat on the edge of the guest bed and looked at the worn photo of German on the nightstand. His eyes always seemed happy, even in silence. I told Jimena that she still had a smile on her face when she let me. I ran my finger along the edge of the frame and took my mind back to the years after her death. Jimena was only 7 years old. I remember how she clung to my leg at the funeral, how her little hand trembled in mine. I didn't get a chance to cry. Grief had to wait, rent had to be paid, and a little girl still needed snacks and clean socks. I worked the night shift in the hospital cafeteria, juggling whenever I could. By day, I sewed Halloween costumes. One year, a complete butterfly costume with handmade wings. I remember Jimena twisting the fabric in the living room, catching the light like stained glass. I barely slept that week before the art school offered me a late bird scholarship that fall. I remember holding the acceptance letter in one hand and Jimena's dentist bill in the other. It wasn't a big decision. Dreams were a luxury I couldn't afford. I didn't begrudge it. Not really. I loved her so deeply that I considered it sacred. Every sacrifice was an offering, a way to keep her safe, to give her more, to protect her, to make up for the loss of the man she barely remembered. I told myself for years that it would all be worth it, that one day she would understand, that my silent devotion would be her compass. But now, at 62, I wondered if I had taught her convenience, not love. I leaned back against the headboard of the bed and closed my eyes. The house creaked softly, as did my body, aching in places I had previously ignored. They were all sleeping under my roof, yet I had never felt so alien in my life. In the morning I would make coffee, fold clothes, but that night I finally allowed myself to wonder if all this was showing up, what I had been preparing for all my life. 3 days passed without a word from Jimena. No apologies, no forced good mornings, just the sound of the cafe doors opening and closing. She emptied it without offering me another cup. The children barely looked up from their screens. Ismael nodded once, but it was mechanical, more habit than kindness. I kept folding his clothes, wiping the counter, even refilling the bathroom's liquid soap when I noticed it was down, but something inside me had gone quiet. I had stopped looking. Thursday afternoon, I walked into the hallway to find Jimena standing in the kitchen, her phone glued to her ear. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. "He should just give us a home," she said. "She's too big to handle it now. It would be easier if we didn't have to tiptoe around her all the time." I froze behind the door, his voice cutting into something raw inside me. There was a moment of pause. Then he laughed low and cruel. "No, he won't fight. He never fights." I turned away before I heard anything else. My hands were cold, not angry, empty, as if every part of me had been peeled off and there was only air in between. That night I sat at the dining room table with a blank page. The kitchen light was humming softly. I picked up my pen and let the words flow out, unbidden, unedited. I was invisible, but not anymore. I still didn't know what this would mean. Not exactly, but writing it felt like I was touching a thread I'd left behind years ago. I closed the notebook and placed it carefully on the table. Then I turned off the light and went to sleep with the silent conviction that something had changed. Not in them, but in me. The next morning, I boarded a bus for the city of San Miguel de Allende. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't leave a note to tell them I was at the market or strolling in the main garden. I grabbed my old leather binder, filled with many documents I hadn't seen in years. Bank statements, the house deed, and the will that German and I had made when Jimena was 10. The law office was on the second floor of a dilapidated brick building. There was a plaque on the door, Renata C. Vargas, attorney. He was about 50, with short white hair and kind but steady eyes. He offered me tea, which I declined. "I want to stop access to all shared accounts," I said firmly. "I want to rewrite my will. Every word, every line. And now, it's time to take back full, unbroken rights to my property." He listened to me without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded. "You're not doing wrong," he said softly. I didn't apologize. We spent the next hour going through the papers, adding names, removing others. Renata explained each form, giving me room to ask questions, but I had none. Every step felt right, not easy, but right. As I stepped outside, the air felt different on my skin, perhaps stronger, or perhaps I felt it for the first time in years. On my way home, I stopped at a bakery on Mail Street and bought a small croissant, just one. I ate it in the main courtyard, near the bus stop, surrounded by strangers and late-falling leaves. It wasn't a celebration. Not at all. But something had changed inside me, and this time I wouldn't hide it in a corner. Jimena found out 2 days later. I had just put the lawyer's receipt in my drawer when she burst into the kitchen, her phone in her hand like a weapon. "What did you do?" she screamed, her eyes glowing red with anger. "The bill? Why can't I withdraw my savings? Why is everything blocked?" I didn't raise my voice, just looked at her and said, "Because they're mine?" She blinked as if she didn't understand the words, as if I spoke in a language she'd never bothered to learn. "Are you crazy?" I hiss. "Do you want the kids and me to end up in the streets?" I folded the napkin in my hand. "You would think something." He didn't reply, just walked out, slamming the pantry door as he left. That afternoon he made phone calls. First to his cousin in Querétaro, then to someone from the church we hadn't been to in years. "I heard some of the stuff. He's changed. After all we've done, he's still giving us away for nothing." His voice cracked for effect and softened at the right moments. The next morning I opened my inbox and saw messages I hadn't asked for. "You will die alone." One read. "No wonder he can't even summon up the courage to talk to you. Maybe it's over for him." Most of the messages were self-important. I read them once and didn't respond. Even Ismail, who had always been like a thought in the background, stopped looking me in the eye. He walked past me without a word, his steps heavier than necessary. The house felt colder, even though the thermostat hadn't changed. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened the garage and dragged my old chair back into the living room. I pulled down the gray curtains Jimena had put up and hung up the floral ones I had sewn the year she went off to college. I bought a bouquet of daisies and placed them in the center of the table, not because they were her favorite, but because I liked them too. In the silence that followed, I sat back in the armchair that was finally mine again and let the stillness settle in like a new kind of peace. I waited until the dishes were done and the kids came up. The kitchen was still warm from dinner, the scent of garlic and tomatoes wafting in the air. Jimena lay on the couch, scrolling through her phone with one foot down. "I need to talk to you," I said. She didn't look up. Now I sat down across from her and placed the printed statements on the coffee table between us. Some of the money I didn't withdraw. Thousands of pesos are missing. Jimena looked at the papers and returned to her screen. "We needed this. Kids' school supplies. Car repairs. You don't understand. You didn't even ask." Her thumb stopped scrolling. "Why are you being so dramatic? You have so much. Don't you think it's time to think about us?" I really looked at her. I looked at her. She was no longer a 12-year-old asking for ballet slippers. She was a grown woman asking me for more than I had left to give. "I've spent my whole life thinking about you," I said softly, "but I'm never going to let you walk away from me quietly again." Jimena rolled her eyes. "You're old, Mom. You don't need all this. It's just space and money. Why are you still keeping it?" I didn't panic or cry. "Then you'll have to make a life for yourself without me," I said. For a moment, he was silent. The room around us seemed tense. I stood up and gathered the papers. "You can keep them until the end of the month," I added. "But after that, I want my house back." Jimena didn't follow me when I left the room, and for the first time, I didn't look back to see if she would. The next week the papers arrived. Jimena ripped them up and threw them at my feet. "This is my house, too," she yelled. "Are you crazy?" I said calmly, though my hands were shaking. I reached for him. Ismail said nothing. He stood behind her with his hands folded, his eyes closed. He was used to living here without rent and without responsibility. Once when I asked him to take out the trash, he said, "That's your job, isn't it?" Now, he just shook his head and mumbled, "Are you breaking up this family?" I laughed. I think all of this happened long before the papers were signed. Over the next few days, Chimenia called anyone who was willing to listen. Cousins she hadn't spoken to in years, old friends from church, neighbors. The phone rang incessantly, and people asked how she could be so cruel. They repeated her words. "After all he had done for you, he took you with him. You will die alone, Amalia." The whispers began, too, on the sidewalks, in the market, with passion and discretion. But one afternoon I found an envelope on my porch with no address. Inside was a folded letter from Mrs. Torres, who lived 2 doors down. "Amalia, I have lived on the street in front of your house for 20 years. I saw how much you carried, how much they overlooked. I never said anything, but I want to tell you that I see you. I have always seen you." I held the letter as if it were something delicate and sacred. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my notebook. That night I stood by the window, watching the porch lights flicker across the street. For the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't as alone as they wanted me to believe. The house had been quiet for months. No footsteps upstairs, no slamming doors, no lights flickering on in every room. Just the soft hum of loneliness that takes root. I spent my days slowly arranging shelves, reading old novels, even painting the kitchen cabinets a pale blue I'd chosen just for myself. One night the phone rang. I didn't know the number, but as soon as the voice came, I knew who it was from.
Mom.
Simina's voice was thinner than I remembered, the edges worn. We're in trouble. The kids miss you. I shouldn't have said these things before. I leaned against the counter. My hands were dry from gardening, and I rubbed my thumb across my palm to keep grounded. We just need some time, she added. Just until we get back on our feet, please. I closed my eyes. I could imagine her, Ishmael, the children scattered across the living room, their voices echoing through my world, crumbling away again. Still, I missed them. God help me. I missed them. But not enough to go back. Sorry, Jimena, I said, but I can't go back to being the same. Silence fell. Then she hung up. I held the phone to my ear for a few seconds, listening to the buzzing where her voice had been. That night, I found myself staring at the door to the guest room they called their own. It remained closed, just as I had hoped. I found sketchbooks in a box tucked away in the back of a hall closet labeled Old Clothes. Most of the pages were blank. Some had half-drawn flowers and faces, which I forgot to make. My hands shook as I drew those shaky, blurry, but still perfect lines of mine. At the San Miguel Community Center, I signed up for a beginner art class. I almost didn't go. The first day, I spent 15 minutes in my car before I went in. But when I walked in and smelled the scent of pencils and linseed oil, something stirred inside me. I returned every week. I drew quiet things, tea leaves, resting hands, everything. Instructor Clara encouraged me gently, without asking why someone my age was starting over. One day she leaned on my shoulder and said, "Your lines know where to go, even when you don't." At home, I planted band and rosemary plants in the empty beds in the front. My knees ached, but the earth was warm and supportive. I watched the bees hovering over the flowers and felt a comfort I didn't know I had lost. Home shifted its place. I took down the paintings Jimena had ordered online and replaced them with my own drawings, first small, then bigger and bolder. I bought new curtains. I moved my chair to a sunny corner and drank tea uninterrupted in the afternoon. One night I laughed. I really laughed at something I had read in the newspaper. The voice startled me. I hadn't heard it in so long that it felt strange. But it was my voice, and it was real. And as I stood at the window that night, watching the rosemary sway in the breeze, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt at home. The spring art show was held in the community center's multipurpose room, where linen skirts lay on folding tables and paintings hung on wire hangers. I arrived, my little portfolio clutched under my arm, hands shaking slightly, without wondering if what I had drawn was hanging on any wall other than my own. Clara greeted me with a smile. "Have you come?" she said, helping me hang my favorite pictures on the lavender stems. Old hands, a child's face turned to the sun. When people started coming in, I stayed behind, half hoping to go unnoticed, but they did. They stayed, asked questions. One woman bent her head against the picture in the kitchen window and said, "There's something about it that seems to breathe." I didn't say much, just nodded and said thank you, holding the silence in my chest as if it were something precious. That week someone knocked on the door. 2 girls from the neighborhood were standing on the porch, a basket of bread between them. "Hello, Mrs. Amalia," she said, with great expectation and a heartbeat, as if the words were a long wait. "Our mother says your garden inspires her." I knelt down next to her and smiled. "Tell her I'm grateful." Her light, carefree laughter echoed off the sidewalk. That night I sat in my chair by the window in the last light of day, resting on the rosemary flowers outside. I opened my notebook and wrote. I had thought disappearing was a loss, but maybe I had never been seen until now. For so long I had poured myself into the lives of others, measured my worth by what I gave, how silent I could be, how little space I could take up. But now here, in this house that I had reclaimed inch by inch, I realized a simple and surprising thing. I was never supposed to disappear. I was supposed to put down roots.
M.